All right. So our next speaker is Dave Vernier. He is the founder and co-president of Vernier Software and Technology. They've been producing software, sensors, lab interfaces, books, and other products for science teachers for 36 years. Their company's actually just down the road a little ways. And if you've been if you've used the Logger Pro software, then in your science classes, biology classes, whatever, you're using their equipment. So thank you, Dave.
Welcome, everybody. This is our website. I didn't bring a lot of stuff, but I want to give you a little bit of flavor of what we do. Some of you may have used our products in science classes. We make sensors for science teachers and the software to support that. And then we do books. So as these pictures slide by, you'll see some of the stuff. And I passed out some brochures, give you something to look at while you're listening to my talk, maybe. But anyway, you should get the flavor of what we do. I'll hold up a couple things. In the old days, we started with Apple II computers. And the old model was we would have a box that plugged into a computer. We call this a lab interface. And then sensors plugged into this box. And we still do that. So I can plug in, like this is a force sensor, I can plug in and measure force. And physics teachers, love to do that. And we have gone to even a little handheld computer that we designed. And it's, so you can get rid of the computer and just do wireless stuff. I mean, not wireless, but mobile stuff. I can plug in here and he's reading for us portable. So that's another option. So this is the evolution of stuff. Over the 36 years is a long time. And nowadays we're going more and more to stuff like this on an iPad. We have a program called Graphical Analysis that talks Bluetooth to this temperature probe. I passed around brochures. You can see we have a whole family of, I'm saying connect now, and it's going to find this thing, hopefully, and then it will be displaying temperature. So this actually manages, you're not going to be able to see this very well, but I'll just have a number there. There's the temperature. Anyway, the point is we can do this stuff wirelessly now, and that seems to be the way we're going in the future. We can do stuff like streaming this out. If you had an iPhone and if we were on the same network, you could be looking at my data from this thing, and all of you at the same time. So there's lots of possibilities. Anyway, my point of all this is that just giving you the flavor of what we do. This is a wireless pH sensor. Kind of nice for a chemistry teacher. The wire, maybe knock the beaker over because of the wire weight. And this is an oxygen sensor, just for fun. Let's see. See how much oxygen's in the air here. .56% oxygen. That's what I think about what I remember from biology classes, right? And what happens if I hold my breath a little bit and breathe on it? So it went down to 16. That's pretty typical. The point is, I'm an animal. I take oxygen out of the air, so there's not as much oxygen in the air after I breathe it out, right? Anyway, the point is we can do great science experiments. But that's not what this talk is about. This talk is about what I thought would be important to you guys, and that is jobs. So I'll just say a few words about our company and as far as employment goes, because I think some of you are going to be looking for jobs in a few years. Our company is down there on the Tectonics campus, right near the Nike employee store, if you know where that is, right at the Milliken Way Max stop. We have about 112 employees. We've been around forever. And it's a mixed bag of the people who design sensors, the people who write software, the people who build, not so much build the software, but finish it up and test it and calibrate it and put it in boxes and ship it. all the business people who support that, and then a whole bunch of former teachers and college professors that support the teachers when they call up and say, I can't get that darn thing to work. How do I do that? You know, that oxygen sensor maybe isn't working right. How do I get it to work and do that lab? And then I think, and then there's all people that order parts. There's people that do the website. So I just went through a tally as I was getting ready for this talk, and out of those 112 employees, there's about 30 that I would call true total technology people. And that's what I'm going to concentrate on in this talk. And I went and interviewed our head of software development, our head of hardware development, and said, hey, what do you look for in an employee? And that's what I'm trying to relay. So let's go through those people. In the hierarchy of our technical people, I suppose the stars are the software developers. We have about 12. We have to do software for Mac, for Windows, for iOS, for Android, for Chromebooks, and probably missing something. I think that's the main platforms we're working on now. In the past, we've done TI calculator programming and other things. Anyway, I went to the heads of that department. There's two. There's a co-head situation with a woman and a guy. And just said to them, what do you look for in a new employee? And their answers were a little surprising to me. I kind of expected they were going to say, I want someone who's incredibly good at C++ or something like that. They didn't say stuff like that. Here's what they said. The first thing they said was, we want someone who's good at learning new things. And then they explained why that is. For example, we hired lots of our programmers, and they're doing something totally different than what they thought they were going to do. For example, I don't think we had a Chromebook in our office 2 years ago, and now about half of our programmers are developing for Chromebooks. Things change very quickly. So it almost doesn't matter if you're an expert in programming language X. What matters is, can you learn programming language Y when it comes along? And you've got to be a good learner, you've got to be flexible, and you've got to be willing to learn new things. That was their number one thing they suggested. What else do they look for in people? They said they want someone who's shown some passion for software development by doing things outside of the regular classwork. Things like developing stuff on an open source platform, contributing to the community of software developers. And then they also mentioned that four-year college degree is a good thing, but not absolutely required in the software development world. So then another major theme that they brought up is communication and collaboration. When I was a software developer, I sat in a room by myself. There was no internet, and I worked on a computer program. It was about the loneliest job on the planet Earth. I didn't speak to a person all day long. The nearest thing to communicating was I might have to go get a book out and look up something and try to figure out how to solve this problem. It is exactly the opposite now. About half of our space for the software developers is meeting rooms. And when I go up to see somebody, there's about a 50% chance I won't be able to see them because they're in a meeting. The process of software development has become very collaborative. They tend to meet every day and talk about how do we design this and who's going to work on this. And they have what they call stand-up meetings every morning. They're supposed to take 10 minutes. No one sits down. That's the idea, to keep the meeting moving. And you talk about what you did yesterday, what you plan to do today, and what troubles you're having. And the idea is that the part about the trouble is the idea that somebody can say, Joe can say, hey, I can help you with that. I did that 2 weeks ago, or something like that. So my message here is that collaboration and working as a team is absolutely critical in software development and everything else in the business world today. We want somebody who can get along with other people, can communicate well and explain their situation, stuff like that. So I think that summarized. Oh, let's make one more comment about that. I think it's a great thing is that there's been a problem historically of getting young women to go into engineering careers and even software careers. And one thing that I think is improving that situation is this collaboration. I think in general, women like to collaborate and work in groups, and I think it's made software development more attractive to young women. So for the young women in the class, in the group here, I would say keep in mind that software development can be an interesting job in the sense of you work as a team and it's a fun thing to do. Okay, so then I went and talked to the hardware guys. They happen to be guys in our place, and that's too bad. That's a place where we really have not succeeded in getting any women to apply very much. So software guys told me those things that I just listed, and I went to the hardware people, and I did expect somewhat different answers, but surprisingly, I got pretty similar stuff. Here's what the hardware guys said. First of all, they do look for someone with a BS in electrical engineering. It's pretty much a required thing. But they said then right away, they said, we want someone who's done a lot of work on their own, outside normal coursework. Things that would really wow them, like tinkering, a good tinkerer who's built all kind of gizmos, or somebody who's done a lot with the robotics team, or somebody who's done a lot with maker projects, that kind of thing. And then the one thing they stressed, I remember I'm talking to the hardware engineers who 5 years ago wouldn't have given a hoot about programming skills, but the hardware guy said, you know, right now what's important is programming skills for a hardware engineer. 5 years ago, we had a world, in our world anyway, where there were hardware guys who made hardware. Then there was the software guys who were supposed to write the software to support it. That's not the way it is so much anymore. If you look at those brochures going around, there's those what we call Go Direct sensors. Every one of those has 2 microprocessors in it. And the guy who's designing the hardware, the sensor, is really pretty much gotta know the programming, and you can't just farm that out to somebody else. It's so integrated into the product, it wouldn't make any sense. So we're not gonna hire any hardware engineers unless they also know microprocessor programming, because it would just be inefficient. You can't, there's not time to go back and forth between the two. So I guess that's a summary. Oh, a few other people I should mention. We also have about 3 people who are involved in our website, and designing the website, maintaining it. And those people are also stars of the company. They are well paid, and they're the criteria for them. It's not so much degrees again, but it's a case of good skills, and also in that world you have to be technically savvy, but you also have to have some real skills artistically. And you have to know what looks good, and you have to know how to lay things out, and so that's a real key there. And then finally, as far as technical people at our work, we have about 5 people who I would call technicians. They repair things, they solder things together when we're making prototypes, they fix things when they break, and they set up automated testing systems for sensors. So when that temperature system comes in, we've got to test every one of them. We don't make them, but we test them. So they set up systems that can do that testing. So I think that's a rundown of what we do, and I'll see if you have any questions. Anybody questions? Yep. I'm sorry, I have a little trouble hearing.
I think it was, how did you first start being interested in this type of technology?
Okay, remember this is ancient history to you guys, but in the late 70s, well, first of all, in the late 70s, this is local lore, Tektronix was a huge company. Tektronix had, in 1980, Tektronix had 25,000 employees in this state. That's more than Intel has now. And this state was a much smaller state, so in those days, Tektronix was the king of the hill. I mean, it was a bigger deal than Nike or Intel are now. Well, in those days, I was lucky to be teaching out I was a physics teacher, and I taught out at Hill High and then at Glencoe. And Tektronix actually got us some real early, I wouldn't call them computers, I would call them programmable calculators, but I started learning programming on those, just doing my own thing for my own classes. And then it got to be in the late 70s that computers went from being something as big as an office building, and it cost millions of dollars and only banks and the Defense Department could afford them, to something that you could sort of afford. I think I paid $2,000 for my first Apple II, and that would have been equivalent maybe $3,000 now. That's a lot of money, but I was able to do it, and I loved it, and I started writing lots of programs. So it was the luck of computers just becoming available at the right time And then as I started writing little programs for my class, I really immediately saw that it did useful things. I mean, we had a world before where I couldn't do that experiment with the oxygen sensor. There's just no way in the world to do it, right? And I couldn't even do a temperature experiment, right? There was no way to even do an experiment where you have some chemicals, you measure the temperature, and you maybe make an exothermic reaction to heat up the temperature. To demonstrate that, you couldn't even do that. So just the world's simplest thing of having even on an Apple II screen with a number on it was just a huge breakthrough. And I started writing those programs for my own class, and finally I said, maybe we'll try to sell these things. So we did. Other questions?
So I have been lucky enough to come tour your facility a number of times now. And one of the really fun things is the amount of cool projects and toys you guys have laying around the office. Could you maybe tell them something about one of your favorite projects that you have?
Well, lately, this isn't a product of ours, but we've been playing with augmented reality sandbox. If you haven't seen those, OMSI has two now. It's a sandbox with a Kinect viewer over top of it. A Kinect 3D camera, I think is the proper term. And it surveys the sand surface, and then it has a Linux computer with shareware software that does the math and does the color coding for the elevations of the sand surface. Sort of like, when you go hiking, there's a topographical map with lines on it, right? It creates that thing on the fly and with color coding, and then you can just scoop the sand and it changes on the fly, and it's pretty amazing. It's been great fun. If you're into Linux, check out Augmented Reality Sandbox, and if you search for that on Google, you'll find lots of great movies happening. And that reminds me of something I forgot to say. The software developers, one of the things they also said to me, is, as far as skills for people they're looking for, they better be very good at Googling. Because that's how software developers find answers. If you can't get something to work, you start Googling, how do I do this? Or arrays and Linux and da-da-da-da. And it's who's the best Googler is often the person who solves the problem. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.